Kenya Editors Guild. Karibuni sana. And I think I will start off by saying a bit about myself, because I've been asked several questions this morning, whether I am the Sami Muraya the musician, whether I am Sami Muraya the sportsman. And I'll say I am not the musician, though we happen to come almost from the same region. I am the sportsman because I'm very passionate about sports, but I've worked in the development world since 2001, so that is what I really do. Enough about me. We're here to talk about 10 years of Vision 2030, and we're here at the invitation of the Implementation Board, and I have to recognize, of course, the gentleman seated on the table in front of me, Chairman of the board, Dr. James Mwangi, as well as the other board members. And we have two PSs who will be on a panel here later on, and we will be able to question them, because we were basically asking ourselves when we came here, where has Vision 2030 been? Where has the board been? We've not heard from them, I think, since the year 2013. They went quiet. So where has the board been? What have they been up to? And right now I was talking to Dr. Mwangi, and he was telling me it's because they did not have something to show. But 10 years is a long time, and definitely we will be talking about the gains that have been met during those 10 years. I'd like to invite the first speaker this morning, and that is Ambassador Dennis Awori, who's part of the Vision 2030 Delivery Board, and also a former envoy in Japan and Korea, so I'm sure he'll be telling us a lot about industrialization, especially in those regions, and what we've been able to gain so far. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Sami. Mr. Churchill Otieno, Chairman, Editors Guild. Ms. Christine Guku, Secretary General of the Editors Guild. Members of the Editors Guild, journalists, and of course, our own Chairman of the Vision 2030 Delivery Board, Dr. James Mwangi, the PS State Department of Planning, who is our immediate past Director General of Vision 2030, PS Kevit Desai, board members, Vision 2030 Secretariat, good morning. As you've heard, my name is Dennis Awori, and I'm a member of the Vision 2030 Delivery Board. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this roundtable, and to thank you for coming early and coming ready to deliberate and discuss with us fully about the achievements that we've done as a country in implementing Vision 2030 over the last 10 years. June the 10th marked the anniversary since Kenya embarked on implementing its Vision 2030. It was, and still is, a watershed for the country to take stock of the benefits and impact of its long-term development plan, and ascertain whether it is on the right track and whether she will indeed achieve her overall objective of becoming a rapidly industrializing upper middle income country with a high standard of living for all of its citizens, or whether she needs recalibration strategies to look for new opportunities over the next 12 years to the year 2030. As Kenya's best model of a public-private partnership, the Vision 2030 Delivery Board involves stakeholders across the board, from government, from the private sector, and from civil society, for public discourse to discuss the Vision 2030 as a nationally relevant issue. Remember, the vision is inclusive and must be owned by all of the citizens of this country if it is to succeed. It is with this in mind that we have invited you here today to ask you to help stimulate the discourse. Today's theme will therefore be on the media's role in driving the national development agenda. According to the latest consumer survey by Kenya Audience Research, the majority of Kenyans still prefer traditional media as their first source of information. And the average number of Kenyans who consume media daily is approximately 16 million, 94% of whom consume TV, radio, and print, while only, and this surprised me, only 33% consume the new media, but not exclusively. This makes you very important as a suitable entry point for engaging and seeking public dialogue, hopefully positively. Our wish is to create awareness of the 10th anniversary achievements of the country under Vision 2030, and secondly, to spark debate and engagement on the opportunities and challenges for the next 12 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I said I'd be very brief, and I'd just like to finish by saying that we really hope that you will join us in these discussions today fully and in the endeavors to follow, and I look forward, on behalf of the board, to working with you and our continuing engagements on the national vision. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, and we look forward to today's deliberations. Thank you.
It's very rare to hear somebody say they are going to be brief, and they are actually brief. So thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think it's only fair that we formally introduce the board for the implementation board for Vision 2030. And I had already mentioned Dr. James Mwangi, who's the chairman. We have members, of course, Ambassador Dennis Awori, Dr. Moses Ikiara, sorry, Dr. Kevit Desai, Dr. Julius Muya, who's also the former Director General, Seth Masese, who's also a representative of the AG's office. Thank you very much. So I'd like to take, oh, there are more? Sorry. Thank you very much, Joyce. And PS Livestock, sorry. I think we just say all the directors kindly please stand. My apologies for that. And I think for the ones that I have not introduced, I'll just pass a microphone. You can quickly do a self-introduction.
I'm Harry Kimtai, PS Livestock.
Lee Chonze, President's Delivery Unit.
Julius Morethi, representing PS, Ministry of Lands and Fiscal Planning.
Thank you very much. Any other Let's have a seat. Thank you very much, and apologies for that once again. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the chairman of the Kenya Editors Guild, Churchill Otieno, because one of the main reasons why we're here this morning is to engage the media, and just knowing how the media so far has been able to engage on issues of sustainable growth and development in the country. And I'll start by putting my chairman on the spot by asking, is the media doing enough? Karibu, Bwana Churchill.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Am I audible? I've just been asking Muraya whether he's a member of the media, because it sounds like he since defected to the secretariat. On a light note. To the chairman of the Vision 2030 Delivery Board, members of the board, PS Planning, PS Decide, PS Livestock, distinguished editors, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a rare opportunity for us as editors to be having a conversation with an institution as critical as the delivery board. Because those of us who've been around long enough know with what eminence this secretariat, this board, the whole notion of Vision 2030 was held with, especially with the coming of the Second Republic, going back to 2002. And today, as we sit here, I think there are significant developments in the Kenyan society that can be traced as ideas coming from the board. Many of us know of the SGR. I think I'll not be very far from fact if I say this can be traced back to the work of the board. Many of us also know of the LAPSET, and I think these two may have roots in the work of the board. Before the formal program started, I was chatting with the chairman, and he made it known to me that in the hat that he's wearing today, he has chaired a total of 78 meetings on issues to do with Vision 2030. Yes. Then in my heart of hearts, I said, Dr. Mwangi probably is the right person to answer some of the questions that we in media may have. Yeah. But before I get to those questions, as part of just triggering some debate for us this morning, and in the spirit of keeping it, short and sweet, as Ambassador ably did before me, allow me to just outline what we see as the role of media in society from the Kenyan Editors Guild. The Guild has a new leadership. In fact, today we are exactly 100 days in office, and this week we'll be doing our own checks in terms of scorecard, where we are. But from where we sit, independent media has three distinct roles. The first one, we owe the public a duty to give them accurate information in a timely fashion. That's the very first one. The second one, independent media must create a platform for public debate on issues that are important to the public. And the third one, and probably most critical, if you ask us, is that we perform a watchdog role. And this watchdog role goes to check on those in positions of power. There could be those in big offices in government, there could be those in political leadership, even in private positions, but who then hold a certain public mandate. We have that duty. And when I reflect on the three pillars of Vision 2030, the economic, the social, and the political, we do find that they map almost fairly accurately in terms of the role of the media. That the media has a very, very specific role in each of those pillars. So that if we go into the economic pillar and we say that, and hold that our ambition is to move higher up in the value chain, there's a role for media in that. Indeed, the media too can be seen as an economic entity. And one there asks, how then should the media then move up that value chain? I think many questions arise, and I see seats lined here. I'm sure we'll get into them. In all of those pillars, there's the question of public participation, which connects very, very directly to the role of public debate that the media performs. Because unless the media is alive and a partner in this journey, I don't see how we can have an effective and complete and useful public participation. So I think there's a clear issue there. When you go back to the economic pillar, and if you are to do a content analysis of media in the last 20 years, for argument's sake, and if you just pick some of the critical sectors, for instance, not even sectors, even areas in terms of food production, if you pick maize, or you pick sugar, or you pick coffee, or you pick tea, or you pick tourism, we'll find that we've attempted to highlight some of the issues in those areas. And indeed today, if I asked Bonyo here, he would tell me that in a lot of those sectors, if you looked at it in terms of developments over the last decade or so, we seem to be giving up production to importation in many of those areas. So that in maize, for instance, 20 years ago, a farmer in Kitale earned 34, 35 bags from an acre. Today, I'm told that figure is about 13, 14. And that indeed many of them are exiting maize growing. Sugar is very, very current. It's very, very clear. 20 years ago, we had problems in the sugar sector, but we did have some production happening in that area. Today, a big chunk of the sugar business has been handed over to those who import sugar, not those who produce it. I could go on, but those are issues that we need to pick up and address. When it comes to the political pillar, just this week, the media has been highlighting things that I believe are fairly serious questions in terms of our democracy. They could be summarized in terms of, do we still have an opposition in this country? I think in a democracy, it's incomplete unless there's an effective opposition. But that's just a headline, like an editor, I like going through headlines. But behind it, I think there are lots of questions that we could get into. What am I trying to say? I think when I came in, we were exchanging some jokes with my secretary and asking, why does it seem that the media has been marginalized when it comes to Vision 2030? How is it that the media was not an enabler, was not seen as an enabler in the delivery of these pillars? And we joked and said, even in this breakfast this morning, we seem to be sitting in different pillars. Is that deliberate? Just a point in light note. But ladies and gentlemen, I think those questions are questions we need to confront. We need to address truthfully as citizens, as friends, because today I believe we need to start on a different part of this journey. And the beneficiary for us all, for the media, it will be the audience, for the Secretariat, for the Vision 2030 board, it will be the citizen. Though that's just two names of the same individual. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Churchill. And you kept on talking about sugar. And right now it's become a very sensitive thing in this country when you talk about sugar because of the confusion with mercury and how the two come together, which has become a real mystery as we talk about issues in the country. I'd like to invite the chairman of the Vision 2030 Implementation Board, Dr. James Mwangi. And of course, Dr. Mwangi will be telling us how Vision 2030 is intertwined to the President's Big Four and how it has morphed from MDGs and to the now SDGs. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you very much, Sami, Chairman of the guild, the secretary, members of the guild, principal secretaries, members of the board. It's really a very unique meeting, as has been suggested by Otieno, about this convening where we dialogue about the national aspiration and national strategic plan, and try to map, as most Otieno has said, the critical role that the media can bring a whole nation to dialogue and debate, particularly at a time that you say you are almost midway. You've done 10 years, you have 12 years. So a national dialogue can really inform how the plan can be executed within the next 12 years. But more importantly is to ensure that everybody in the country is not left behind. A national plan of this magnitude creates enormous opportunities, and it's knowledge of opportunities that make people to position themselves. So if we could get all citizens align themselves to the opportunities that will be created by implementation of a national strategic plan, then we would really have done great service to our fellow Kenyans. The chairman initially asked me, James, we haven't heard about Vision 2030 for quite a long time, and what makes you call us today and want us to dialogue about Vision 2030? We all know, as Kenyans, we are very skeptical about stories and visions unless somebody puts data on the table. And as a vision, we had a blueprint, but a blueprint was not sufficient because, as Kenyans have always said, they have heard the stories before. And what we thought was, why don't we execute and build a significant and critical data, and then we could then put the data on the table and tell Kenyans, this is what Vision 2030 Delivery Board is all about, with sufficient information. So this morning, as a board, we wish to share with you the roadmap that we have taken and the level of implementation and execution, and hopefully arm you with sufficient information that you can truly be our enablers in informing, as the chairman said, Kenyans. So our chairman will take really that challenge. And if we missed the opportunity to make you enablers before, we'll count on you now as the enablers, particularly in what you articulated as the first law of informing truthfully, honestly, and as factually as possible the picture of a nation. So I'll try and go through a couple of slides just to really create impression. We can't be able to summarize a whole national plan. So we'll just highlight on a sectoral basis or on a pillar basis so that we see the big picture. But if we step aside and say, what was the genesis of Vision 2030? It was a review of the state of the nation after nearly 50 years of independence. At independence, we had three main but simple aspirations to bring to an end ignorance, poverty, and disease. But after 50 years, we realized the three big enemies of the Kenyan nation were still with us, and not much had been achieved. And the debate was, how could a nation be unable to overcome three simple, clear challenges? And the conclusion was, it was because there was no mapped plan of dealing with those three aspirations. There was no implementation plan. There was an aspiration, but no plan. And that was then the basis that if we wanted to achieve national ambitions, national aspirations, there must be a detailed plan that people hold themselves to execution, because a plan is as good as its execution. And so the board was constituted to do two things. First, help get the nation to gravitate around a national aspiration, which then came to be known as Vision 2030. The second one is to measure, record, and report on delivery of the same. And so today, we could simply say we are putting before you a scorecard of how we have performed over the last 10 years in delivery of Vision 2030. The aspiration of Vision 2030 was not as simple as the aspirations at independence. They were not that simplistic, they were more granular, and they were more integrated to the nation. And they tied out to two things: quality of life for the Kenyans, and the second one, competitiveness of the Kenyan nation among other nations. So those were two broad aspirations. The aspiration on the nation was that Kenya would join the ranks of high middle income states that are globally competitive in every aspect. And so it was more about competitiveness of Kenya as a nation, because it's only when a nation is competitive that is able to play in the marketplace, in the global sphere. And the second one was, how do you convert that competitiveness of a nation into quality of life? And so the second overreaching goal was a high standard of quality of life for the Kenyan people in an environment that is clean and, to the best of definition, an enabling environment, and particularly defined in democratic space. So it was more about the people and the aggregate, the nation. So that's how we would break down the vision. And then the question was, how do you deliver this? And we felt that the quality of life, to a great extent, the government can only create an enabling environment, and then the private sector would deliver on opportunities that Kenyans could tap into, could lock into, and improve their lives. So how was to the government to improve the environment? The first one was on governance. How is the nation governed? And that again, it's where the democratic space and structure of government, and that was codenamed the political pillar. Political pillar was not about the politics. It's governance structure of a nation. The second one, of course, was where the government had to do something. It was felt that the market forces were not the best in terms of social quality of life of our people. So the social pillar, to a great extent, was said, the government needed to do quite a lot. And the social pillar was broken down broadly into three major facets. The first one was access to education and quality of education. The second one was affordability of health and access to universal health for the citizen. And the third one was basically housing, water, access to amenities. That's basically, to a great extent, an overlap with the social pillar. And of course, the social pillar was then the microeconomic environment that the country was building. How possible would you create an enabling microeconomic environment for the private sector to thrive, and particularly to draw global capital so as to boost the capital of Kenyans in building and it's that where the government realized that was not just about the three prices of inflation, exchange rate, and interest rate. They realized the private sector will not come into place unless there was an enabling environment in terms of infrastructure. And so underlying the economic pillar was the enablers. And so those are broadly the categories that we keep on measuring, the delivery. And so the scorecard will overlap with those major three pillars. And we see what we could. With your permission, I'll try to put a couple of slides, and then we could really focus on those slides. We've tried to summarize them very broadly, and we'll try and start with the social pillar. Enablers. And enablers, as we said, it's what most people call infrastructure, a load network. Really, how do we get the produce from the production centers to the markets, both local and international markets? And we can see where we were in 2002, approximately 9,000 kilometers of paved roads. And we are now at approximately 12,000 kilometers of paved roads. So it was more to do with a huge infrastructure. This figure a little bit has a duplication aspect of it, because if you look at the Northern Corridor was still there, but it's now fully repaved afresh. But if the number of kilometers have not increased, because Mombasa Road to Kisumu to Busia was there, but it has to be rebuilt afresh completely. So when you really talk about the work that has been done, it is much more than the kilometers that are reflected on this. So the new kilometers that will be seen will be something like from Isiolo to Moyale, linking Ethiopia. It will be the road from Voi to Mwatate. It will be the bypasses in Nairobi, but Thika Road was still there. Rebuilding of all those roads, Namanga to the river, those roads are not counted as additional because it's national paved roads. So there is much more that has been done by maintaining the roads. And we have seen the infrastructure in the country has significantly changed. I think where we stand out, because there is no duplication, it's just addition, is like electricity, where, as we can see, at commencement, we had approximately 1,000 megawatts. So we are now nearly 2,400 megawatts. So more than doubled within the 10 years. And things like power rationing are over. And it's not power rationing that is most important. Maybe the most important aspect of power is the quality of power. It's not really generation. And lastly is the cost of that power. Power as of 2003, we were talking of 24 cents US dollars per kilowatt. We are now down and debating where it will be at 8 cents or 12 cents. So that is the debate. So we can say it is not just that you have doubled the generation of power, but you have halved the cost of power. These are the big enablers, so that nobody can say they can't set a factory in Kenya because there isn't adequate power. Let's look at infrastructure in terms of communication. Sometimes these figures, you look at them and wonder truly is how fast this economy has, particularly ICT. And then you look at the telecommunication space. From 1 million mobile phones to 42 million mobile phones within a country. So you could imagine the impact in terms of ICT. You look at the port of Mombasa and look at how the numbers. The 3 berths that have been built, because people always like talking about berth 19. But it's not about the equipment. It's not about the berth. is the economic activities that construction of such a bath brings to bear to the economy. And and how quickly facilitation of trade or logistics within a country is shaped. It is how logistics have improved, is the cost of logistics that is most important. So we see massive and fairly significant. We talk about airports, and we have all been talking about Jomo Kenyatta. We see refurbishment, but it's not the refurbishment of, it's what that refurbishment enables the economy to do. And you're talking of moving from 1 million passengers per year to 7 million passengers in a year. So again, logistics, facilitation, enabling that town. I'm glad today I was reading the newspapers, and Nairobi has been named as one of the most sought African city for holding conferences, simply because there is an airport that can allow and enable quick turnaround as far as transport is concerned. When you look at the number of airlines that now, yes, we are very proud of KQ as the hubbing airline, national, trying to have the whole region to Nairobi. But it's the fact that you have all major European and Asian airlines flying to Nairobi, making it really a destination that people would wish to travel and feel they can quickly move in and out comfortably. And when you look at security, we still may be concerned about security, but security is determined by the ratio of security officers to population. And you can see we have moved from almost 1,200 Kenyans police officer down to almost increasing the ratio and improving the ratio by 3 times in terms of, and suddenly you start realizing security is significantly improving. It is the investments behind these that really generate these numbers. And of course, then without going to major projects, we can talk, and you're very clear on these massive projects that will then enable citizens to enjoy a better quality of life and make our nation a bit competitive. If you look at the economy itself, the economic pillar, then you see how the GDP, and this might be one of the biggest numbers one would ever talk about, the economic growth, the GDP per capita, and Chairman, we look at when we started, the GDP per capita was only 27,000 shillings, and now you are talking a GDP of 167,000 shillings. And you start wondering, 7 times improvement in terms of national wealth divided by the population. You look at GDP per capita itself, the goods and services that are being produced, the value of goods being produced in a year, moving from 1 trillion to nearly 8 trillion shillings worth of goods. And it's that when divided by population, then you're able to talk about GDP. We see a nation we talked about competitiveness, and we see from a position 129, we are down at 80. It is not the 50 spaces that count most, but it's the trend. That you can see a consistent trend. Every year you are improving in terms of ranking, and then suddenly you see the global community notices this. And suddenly we have now almost 168 global companies that over the last 5 years have made Nairobi the headquarters for Sub-Saharan Africa, Then you start seeing we now are drawing the attention of global capital. And once that momentum kicks in, then you become a preferred destination. you consistently become the most innovative, the most integrated country on the continent, then you start seeing numbers moving on. And then we see foreign direct flows. And we can see what has happened, particularly in the recent years, and the number of employees that those direct foreign inflows are bringing on board, and the values. And we start seeing significant moves, and particularly we are the background of shocks, global shocks, and yet we see a resilient economy on all that. And whether you look at the jobs, whether you look at the confidence of the diaspora, and we see its numbers that are growing extremely fast. And well, if you look at the diaspora of the last 5 years, they have more than doubled. And then you see huge microeconomic variables, like money supply, if you want, and then you look at inflation, managed interest rates, managed exchange rates, managed, then you start seeing an economy in real making. And as a result, because of enhanced security, we start seeing our major economic activities like tourism kicking back. At the moment, you can't be able to book, and I would really like to challenge anybody in the room who would be able to get a booking in any hotel in Masai Mara. It's impossible. The place is of a fool. And now people are moving in the morning and coming back in the evening. And you start seeing domestic air travel becoming a huge activity. And Nairobi becoming, the hotels in Nairobi becoming also full for tourists who are going on a daily basis within the region. Then, of course, agriculture. And some of you are spot on. But you know, you are spot on. Yes, what is happening to agriculture? Now, the question is our sugar globally competitive? Is our maize growing globally competitive? And that's the question as Kenyans we need to ask ourselves. Once we said we wanted to be globally competitive, you can only be globally competitive if you are willing to open up your market. And so we have to find new ways. We have either to do proper research, we must mechanize or modernize our agriculture so that it competes. We can't continue to assume that production is through the panga, the hoe, and the jebe, and expect that there will be increased production. It's a globally competitive production process that we have aspired to. Those are the questions that we need to dialogue and say, it is not that we want to kill our sugar industries, it is that our sugar industries are not competitive. It's not that we want to kill our maize farming activities, but our maize farming must be competitive. Yesterday, I had data, Chairman. It is easier to import a bottle of bottled water from Philippines to Nairobi than to do it here. There's something wrong with the economy. You can't build an economy on a cost structure that is higher. You are punishing Kenyans when they are buying 10 shillings more than they could buy. So the issue is, let's not go and engage back to inefficient economy. Let's open the economy to competitiveness so that we can be able. Our education system is very competitive. Our health system is becoming competitive by African standards, not global standards. We are still going to India because India is more competitive than us. We are still sending a couple of children to the US because the US education is more competitive than us. But generally, we can say we can take pride in some of these things on regional level, but there are still some that Mozambique and other countries would be able to sell. So agriculture, we still have a long way to go, but we also see a little bit manufacturing has been a challenge. Manufacturing, as we can see, hasn't kicked on. It has remained 11% GDP contribution consistently for almost the 10 years. look at and this is where, again, maybe we need to ask ourselves, where is the competitive advantage of Kenya? And it appears from data, Kenya seems to have strength in soft power. Tourism, it's very difficult to beat Kenya. If you look at financial services, the region cannot beat Kenya. Everything, it appears in services, Kenya is very strong. Is it a suggestion that Kenya would develop as a service industry, a knowledge economy, based broadly, as opposed to an agricultural economy? But I think once you have soft power, you can quickly translate soft power into productivity. And productivity then drive the other sectors like manufacturing. I think the most impressive is the financial services, moving from 440 billion to almost 4.6 trillion within just a short period. If you look at market cap, from 112 billion to 2.6 trillion, so huge numbers. The financial sector seems to be really doing pretty well. And of course, servicing the region with the petroleum and oil industry, we seem to be doing well. Education, I think it's the social pillar. This is what we would say has been the best performance on the scorecard. We almost now have almost 100% enrollment. If you look at enrollment percentage of population, we seem to be almost now consistently above 100, because older people, including 84-year-old people, are going back to primary. So when you look at percentage of children in primary, it's higher than the population of that age because of overage and basically. But the most telling statistic is the recent one, transition from secondary, from primary to secondary, almost reaching 98. And that, once a country starts keeping their children in school for 18 years, the statistics is as good as the most developed world. The best economies are around 14 years. And keeping our children there, it will be school. School enrollment, as we have said, very, very, very impressive. TVET, here is where we have to do a lot of work. It's amazing that our universities have a higher enrollment in numbers than at our TVET institutions. That doesn't happen in any other economy other than Kenya, where you have more people going to universities than technical institutes. An economy of our size, an economy of our state requires technical skills much more than maybe the very sophisticated managerial skills. So we need, and we are very proud that the initiative is now to change that and get TVETs to be. If you look at health, health is another one that we have achieved a lot. If you look at mortality, moving from 115 down to 49, all the indicators, vaccination and the rest, all the indicators are very, very, very impressive. And it's something that as a nation, you could say quality of life as defined by access to knowledge and quality of health. All the indicators, we are moving the right direction. And lastly, because I want to have more time on the dialogue, is the governance structure. This is what maybe people can't see, like we see the standard gauge railway line or LAPSET, but this may be what is the cause of all these things we said. We heard of the big question, are we losing our democracy? Is it that we are losing our democracy or we are becoming realistic and practical? To me, the greatest risk to this country has always been our politics. Why? Because it was never issue-based politics. It was politics, I don't know, how would you have described our politics in the past? individual. It was never people-centered. It was about individuals. It was about tribes. It was about ethnicity. It was never about issues. But it appears that our politics now can be about issues. If we can sacrifice opposition for the sake of uniting to kill corruption, then maybe that is the best politics we could ever have. If we could unite for the sake of removing ethnicity, if we could unite for the sake of cohesion, those were our biggest challenges. National cohesion, negative ethnicity, and politics of personalities. And we seem to have dealt with that. What has helped us to do that is the governance structure that has enabled us to have that. Maybe what we have come up with is checks and balances. And as you can see from the structure, we now have legislature, national executive, and judiciary at the same level. And I like and celebrate the creative, positive tension that we always see between them. Yes, sometimes sizing each other to establish the boundaries. That would have been expected, but eventually they will settle. And once they start functioning, and we still have 12 years for them to fully settle and function. And the last one would really be very, very proud of is particularly the executive and particularly the county governments. Really, what one would talk of a grassroots, ground-up approach with 45% of the resources, the citizens determining where the shoe pinches most and addressing resources, addressing the needs of the... So this governance structure seems to be playing out. It seems to have addressed two things. One, reduced significantly our political risk. And if you look at the inflows the country is receiving at the moment, rewards us more than anything else. Maybe this has brought a better inflow than even the focus on the microeconomic environment. Why? Because Kenya, people said it has the right people. The skills, human skills in Kenya are good. Infrastructure was reasonably good. Geographical location was right. But politics always brought uncertainty. And that uncertainty was confirmed in 2007, 2008, and almost another miss 2013. But now we seem to have detonated that. We hope it will hold. We hope it will completely shape and put them in structures. And we think that might be the biggest achievement has been on the governance structure. Have we fully solved the problem? Not really. A couple of us, you enumerated them, are still there, and they need to be dealt with. But we still have 12 years. This is just 10 years of the 25 years of Vision 2030. Thank you, our moderator, for allocating me the time to articulate the broad outlines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Unfortunately, I won't allow you a breather. You still have to be part of my panel. So I'll take this opportunity to welcome our panelists. We are just about to get to the interactive segment of this session. And of course, the chair, Dr. Julius Muya, Ochieng Rapuro, and Christine Guku, kindly come to the stage. For those of you on social media, I'm being told that we are tweeting under two hashtags. The first one is hashtag Naona Mapya, and the second one is hashtag Kenya Vision 2030. So for those of you who are on social media, we are tweeting and on Facebook under two hashtags. The first one being hashtag Naona Mapya, and the second one being hashtag Kenya Vision 2030. And I think to kick us off so that we allow Dr. Mwangi some time to breathe, I'll ask Christine, as somebody who's been in the media for a pretty long period, there's a question I had asked the chairman, which he did not respond to, and he threw it back at me, asking me whether I'm a journalist. But unfortunately, today I have to play both roles of a journalist and a moderator, so I have to put everyone on the spot. And the question is the media doing enough to highlight development issues in the country?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I don't know what I would use as a measure to say that the media is doing enough or not doing enough. I would want to say there are gaps. But I would also want to say that the gaps are not just in the media side. I think they're also with the Vision 2030 whole entire structure and how it communicates. As the media, I cannot sit and imagine a story. I have to witness it. I have to have data on it in order for me to write a story. I see a beautiful book here, this one. And one of the things I whispered to Churchill after I saw the book, I said, these guys are very clever. They have hidden all the information in here. I'll tell you why. Even the presentation by the chairman, he showed you graphs, eh? He showed you graphs. I gave you a small narrative about each graph. Very good. Give this to even just my peers who may not be able to interpret this. How far does that information go? I'm thinking of giving this to probably a person who works in an FM station, and not to say that they are not endowed or they don't have capacity to interpret this, but these are numbers for a different set of people. So we need to have a little more conversation on this dream. Break it down to Wanjiko, Kamene, Agre, and everybody else who is sitting out there as the citizen. When the dream was unveiled, I was very excited. Excited because I said, finally we have a plan. Finally we can do something with ourselves as a nation and go somewhere and promise something to our children. For sure. And it is happening, and we can see it happening. However, we are limited in how much we can write about it. When the chairman said that, these people have been lost. As they say in the streets, walienda chini ya maji. So it's time to now come up and literally speak. And I say we need to speak because the frequency of information on the flagship projects is not that much. We will be invited as a media to a launch, a commissioning, and so on. It's not enough. After that, we start to ask questions, and half the time, those questions may not be answered sufficiently for us to craft the story, to explain the story of the vision to the people it is targeted to, the citizens who are our audience. So there's some work that needs to go in there. And then as the projects roll on, some of the things that we started to see, and probably we started to see them when the bigger ones, got underway, the standard gauge rail, and people are getting moved. And then we start to feel the impact of how it is impacting the daily lives of people. Yes, we are trying to move populations from one place to another, move goods from one place to another in a more efficient way. But what does that do to, I actually have 2 uncles who got moved. Not in a bad way, but they needed to make way for this project. But they were completely clueless about the Vision 2030. So there's still something there that needs to happen. Because when we now, as the media, document the impact of the rollout of the projects on the citizens, we are perceived in a negative way as being opposed to the projects. Chairman, I want to tell you, we are not. We are just showing you what is happening on the ground as the projects take effect, as the projects get rolled out. They have some effect. Maybe there was not much preparation in terms of what to expect. I'll probably call them the risks. Nobody told anybody that people are going to be moved for a railway to pass. At the beginning, 2008, 2009, even 2010, we just had it as a story, and it sounded like they'll do it somewhere, not at my village. But now it's beginning to come. And, you know, so that provision of information is important, but also provide a platform where we discuss how do we then mitigate that social side of these projects. I happen to have had some friends who worked at the delivery secretariat some time back. And there was, I think, a plan of how to cushion the societies in terms of when these projects roll out. And that was not spoken about very loudly, which is what needs to go into the media in terms of how are we going to cushion these societies when that happens. Our business is really to be the eyes of the public, the citizens. And so there are certain things that we are required to do. They say that we are the watchdog. And in our watchdog role, we seek accountability and we seek transparency. And so when there's silence, we start to ask, okay, what could be happening there that is being hidden and so on. But really, you might have nothing to hide. But just because you don't speak about it, we become suspicious. So as the media, you need to look at us as partners who can drive this all the way until it is achieved. So bring us on board. Don't keep us kando huko and only invite us to the launches and discussion forums which will come after so many years and so on. I think it needs to be a continuous conversation. I want to stop there for a moment. I will tell you later on about a little story of someone I saw in Voi. Think about 2009. I'll tell you that story. Just make sure you remind me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Dr. Mapya, you wear two hats on this particular panel. First of all, being the Principal Secretary of State Department and Planning at the National Treasury. And two, you're also the immediate Director General of the Delivery Board. And I think there's a question that has been posed by Christine, and it's only fair that we talk about it. Why the silence?
Thank you, Mariah, and good morning, everyone. I want to appreciate you for coming today for this breakfast meeting, roundtable meeting. And because we are with the chairman of the board, you'll give me the permission to ask the chairman to answer that question, because it's something that is dealt with by the board, and the chairman can articulate it better than me as a board member. So please, with your indulgence, chairman.
Well, Daktari,
Thank you very much.
I was trying to give you a breather, but...
Yes, thank you very much, as you can see. But thank you very much. Christine is spot on. I think one of the biggest challenges, and we find this in every aspect of life, is communication. Because of, one, what is adequate communication, what is inadequate communication, what is the right level of communication. As a board, I think the reason we have called the guild, the Editors Guild today, is to seek a partnership. But I think on this partnership, we really ask, and this was our ultimate ask, is whether we could get your support as technical experts in communication as to how maybe we could engage. We can do these in proposals. We say this is so that we are a little bit more educated, we are a little bit more guided, and the communication is in a format, like Christine said, that when it comes to you, it is communicable to Wajiko, such that it is not the threads, you know. We are used to investors' briefs, so they want numbers and threads, and so we are doing it. And this vision is for Wajiko. I agree. Wajiko is the investor, and she's not sophisticated. But looking back, because the board, we have really struggled with this. When we were launched, we thought from 2011 is when we commenced huge campaigns. Initially, it was publicity campaign on creation, so that we could anchor ourselves among the people. Then 2011 we started trying to involve and engage Kenyans. So we started the Wakilisha campaign. And all of us could remember Wakilisha and Heavy. Then in 2013, in Atedeka, it happened. We kept on telling people now we can see things are happening. And then in 2016, we became bold and we said Tunatimiza campaign. All these were the first 3 campaigns. And now, Naona Mapya, na bado ya Tedeka. And you can see now, for the first time, we're able to produce a booklet that not shows just what has been done, but the thread of how has been happening. We felt if we communicated too early, most likely we had nothing. We could reinforce aspersions of doubt when you have nothing much to do. But today with this data, everybody can argue with data. So there's huge room for improvement on communication, because communication allows us to engage the population better. We also thought to highlight some of the critical projects. The best thing was to have site visits. And every time we go to, for mining, we have gone to base titanium, and we go with 30 members of the media. And that week, there is a lot of coverage. The standard gauge rail, we take a ride with the media, the full board. I think Lamu, which is one of the most transformational projects. I think we have been there twice. And constantly, I think the latest one was visiting the bypasses in Nairobi. So we have made attempts, but it appears, Christine, we need to do more. So this partnership will enable us to do more, because we will do it the right way. Kindly hold our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mwangi. I'm now coming back to Dr. Muya, because when Dr. Mwangi was showing us the slides, we noticed that manufacturing has been stagnant. And one of the things that happened recently was the government coming out to say that we were going to get our BRT buses from South Africa. Then we had a turnaround saying again, we are going to local manufacturers. And I think my question to you is, why the first instinct to go to South Africa? And I know it's the same thing that Dr. Mwangi has also spoken about when talking about the cost of production in the country, where it's very expensive and it makes things slightly more expensive than bringing them into the country. So what do we need to do as a nation to improve on that?
Yeah, Mariah, thank you. You are spot on, actually. And it is a fact that, as the chairman of the board said, manufacturing has actually stagnated. Perfect stagnation. Between 9 and 11% contribution to GDP from 1965 to date. So that is a fact. And that is why when we were doing Vision 2030, and that's the framework of mind that we say we must find a way to cure this problem. So if you look at the sectors within Vision 2030, manufacturing is one of them. And it is the second largest sector that was envisaged under the economic pillar to drive the economy forward. Because there's no way we can become an upper middle economy if we don't have manufacturing in place and driving the rest of the economy. And so that is the wisdom of the Special Economics Bills Law, which was passed 2014, 2015, and the regulations thereby issued, to make sure that we've got a framework where there is enough structures on how manufacturing can take place. And because the business of government is to create an enabling environment, government has been working hard to create the enabling environment. But then again, for manufacturing to happen, you need private sector. And that's why you have got clever private sector people sitting on the board, and my chairman is one of them. So that he can bring the ideas that makes private sector tick. That is why we've got Ambassador Dennis Awori representing KEPSA on the board. And so I think it's the gestation period that private sector needs for them to set up shop, to do their feasibility study, and be convinced that they can make money. Because private sector does not invest for magnanimity. They invest where there is indications they will make money, and that is where now we are. And that is the wisdom in the Big Four agenda, where value addition and manufacturing has been identified as a priority sector, leave alone all the other sectors in Vision 2030, and Big Four, manufacturing being one of them. And that is where the government is moving in. My appeal is to the private sector to smell the coffee, because the framework is there. We have set aside large pieces of land, like in Lamu, we have over 700 square kilometers, which have been set up for a special economic zone. There is the Dongokundu in Mombasa, about 3,000 acres. Then we had identified a big one around Greater Mombasa, where we are going to set up a big special economic zone. And also in Kisumu, there is prospecting for a special economic zone. But then, as I said earlier on, private sector takes time, because they have to look at the risks, and they must make sure that the profit motive is properly satisfied. So I think it is a question of how soon can private sector assemble the money, assemble the resources, and start manufacturing the way we are looking to. And I think within a short time, we are going to see that, because very big multinationals have set up their African headquarters in Kenya in the last 4 or 5 years. And that is indication that they have seen that we have got good laws, we have got good framework, and for that matter, good policy intentions by government. Because private sector has to watch and make sure that the government has the right intent, and we have the right intent. And that's going to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Well, right intent, and we are definitely, I'm sure, we will be questioning you about most of that as we go forward, because that's already a commitment on your part. And not forgetting, we have 12 years before the completion of Vision 2030, and we're hoping that most of these will be achieved. Rapuro, I come to you as an editor at the Business Daily, which is one of the dailies that concentrates mostly on economic issues. And Christine has rightfully said that most of the information that is packaged for journalists is not media friendly. What do you have to say about that, and what needs to change so that we can be able to communicate better to Wanjiko?
Thank you, Mariah. I think, as Christine said while starting the conversation, there has been engagement to the extent that the media has continued to focus attention on whatever is going on in the country, in all the three spheres that are also the purview of Vision 2030, economic, social, and political. As an economic journalist, I think we have done a perfect job trying to record and document whatever is happening in all the various facets of our economy. But the thing here is, when you look, for example, at the social pillar of Vision 2030, there is ingrained there what they call a society that is just and equitable. And therefore, this is probably where the challenge starts, is with access to information. I think the poverty of information is one thing that not many of us pay attention to. Just the fact that somebody is in some corner of our country and is not aware of the opportunities that exist is a big problem. There are those who consume what we call mainstream media, but there are also those who consume media that is not mainstream, or media that is in the mainstream but speak to a different facet of people, like community radios, community newspapers. I'm just imagining what happens when, for example, we have the GDP numbers, which are released every year in May, how that therefore translates, for example, in a community radio in Meru. What kind of conversations would they have? Would they translate those numbers, break them down into a form that the local community can engage with and understand? And that, in my view, partly is the obligation of the people generating the information, packaging it, and delivering it to us who are in the media to transmit to the public. At that level, there needs to be a deliberate effort to make sure that apart from speaking the language of those who would read the Daily Nation or the Standard, could we break this information into a form that Wanjiku can understand? At the second level, the challenge comes to us in the media. When we receive this information, what do we do with it? Do we just transmit it in the form it has been delivered to us, or we make an effort to process and package each one of us with our audiences in mind? And I think this is one challenge that we still have, but there is a way in which we can speak to the communities about big economic issues. And it is very easy, and it's a principle of journalism. If we went to communicate things from an impact point of view, tell the person you are speaking to, how is this going to impact you as an individual? They would better pay attention to such a fact. And it would remove, therefore, the kind of dilemma that Christine was talking about, where communities are being moved to pave way for construction of an important national infrastructure, but they don't understand. So if we made it possible for them to understand the impact of whatever infrastructure we are trying to put in place to their own lives as individuals, not as a country, I think would make better progress in delivering the message from wherever it comes from.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mwangi, your forte is in the banking sector. And now I want us to talk about the national debt, because right now we've had a lot of outcry in terms of how much money Kenya owes. And as of 2017, it was starting at 57% of the GDP. How is that affecting the delivery of Vision 2030?
Thank you very much. You notice that when you talk about wealth of an individual or wealth of a nation, it's composed of two things. Savings that are turned into investments. And we look at Kenya 2002, the total national wealth of that year was 1 trillion shillings. If we look at 2017, we're talking of about 8 trillion shillings. We can see the stock of production within a country, how quickly it does. But when you look at the national savings to GDP, the ratio has never changed. It's only 18%. Kenyans have not been very good in savings to convert their savings into investment. As a result, what has happened is that we have now adopted reverse savings, where you take the debt and then you start, because it appears that's what we are best at. Everything Kenyans acquire is I take a SACCO loan or I take a bank loan, then I pay. So that is purely savings, but on a reverse. That is what the nation engaged in. Because essentially, there was the question of the only way the government could invest on these Vision 2030 projects was from taxpayers' money. But the taxpayers' money was not growing significantly fast because the Kenyans were not very good in investing. And consequently, the metrics was, why don't we do a reverse psychology and do reverse savings? And since 2005, particularly when the project started kicking in, 2007, borrowing for Thika roads and the others started off, we have kept up. What we have seen is as we invested in the projects, we borrowed and invested in the project, the savings on Kenyans have grown significantly. The tax collection have moved from 200 billion to about 1.7 trillion. You can call it 7 times, 8 times. So it's matching up. It has grown even faster than the debt has grown. So essentially, it was purely a metric. Am I concerned about the debt? Not really. Because if you look at how much these projects have stimulated the economy, particularly to date, the economy will not really struggle. If we, for instance, are able to capture the GDP of the informal sector, which again, it will force us to recalibrate the economy, we'll see the current ratio that we are talking of 58%, most likely will fall back to 40%. Because we are never able to capture our economy size appropriately. And most developing economies do with about 60, 70. Most of the developed economies are around 80 to 100. So Kenya has it had any strain? So far, we haven't seen any strain on paying debt. But I'm very confident. We talked about 192 companies that have set shop in Kenya and brought in 22,000 jobs. So what we'll start seeing as those takes off, as they start manufacturing within the country, as they start providing services from the country, they will accelerate the growth of the economy. Lastly, let me say, this investment was to enable the economy. And maybe one major step that the country has missed up is the issue of the Big Four. The Big Four is a realization. We have done significantly enough, but we haven't been able to tap fully into the Kenyans to enjoy the gains. And the question is, can we move away from infrastructure development to real economy? Real economy is manufacturing. Real economy is food production. Real economy is health of the people. And suddenly, 3 years of implementation, the big three, who almost see the economy doubling in size. Why? Because we are now not using debt, we are using a private sector wealth. Factories are not being built by, if you look at health, what did we do in health? We simply registered people under National Hospital Insurance Fund from 400,000 households to 7 million households. And suddenly, all those 7 million households are now sourcing medical services from the private sector. We have suddenly seen that nursing homes have suddenly brightened. Why? Because there is distribution. The same will happen. If we manage to get at least 50% of our raw materials that we have been exporting being processed in the country, the amount of jobs will be approximately 2 million jobs will be created by the 50, and then you can imagine what will happen to the economy. So I'm not really worried. That was a necessary step. We needed to stop walking to the job. We needed to buy a car to drive to the job. We are now able to arrive at the job early enough, and we are able to work late in the evening. So we can easily get a promotion.
Well, that's a good reassurance. I can see Dr. Moya wants to add something.
Yeah, allow me to jump in on that. Because I'm in the ministry, the National Treasury and Planning, and the question about the national debt is a subject that we think about, we talk about, and we have got ways in which we are planning how to deal with it. If you look at the budget policy statement that we issued for 2018, we are looking at something which is called fiscal consolidation. So going forward, we want to progressively reduce the quantity and the ratio of the public debt that we have. And that is in line with our management of the economy, just to make sure that we don't crowd out the private sector. But one very important aspect is that when Vision 2030 was launched in 2008, it was very clear, and it was pronounced by the then Minister for National Development, Planning and Vision 2030, Honorable Wycliffe Oparanya, that 70% of the funding of Vision 2030 will come from outside government. However, in the initial period of now implementing the Vision 2030 flagship project, we were not able to get enough private sector money to come in because there were risks that private sector was seeing. And so government has to come in to de-risk the projects that were there. And some of that de-risking is the infrastructure that we are talking about. Talk about the Lamu area where we have got the beginning of the Lapsset corridor. Because the government went there with public debt, we now have a situation where in Lamu, we are getting 7 flights per day going and into and out of Lamu now. Previously, before we started Vision 2030, the flights to Lamu were 3 in a week. So from 3 flights in a week to 7 flights per day. That is what that debt has done. It has created opportunities, opened up our economy in areas where we were not functional. But I want also to say, public debt, or national debt for that matter, is not plain vanilla. Don't just look at it as a number. Ask yourself, what are you doing with that money? Because we are not borrowing for consumption, we are borrowing for investment. That's the best thing that you can do. And so, by getting to public debt, we are conscious that we are doing this so that we can leverage on that debt, just as individuals do. If you want to make money, and even private sector, you borrow so that you can invest and make money. And that is what the government has done. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for expounding on that. Christine, I want us to talk about corruption because it's been one of the biggest impediments of progress in this country. And the reason why I want you to talk or to address the issue of corruption is from a journalistic perspective. How easy or how difficult has it been for journalists to cover that particular topic?
Corruption is tricky because it can be hidden in plain view. There's one of the analysts who said, if you look for corruption, don't go very far, just look at the budget and then you'll see it. Because then you start to compare the numbers that are allocated to which, and you're looking at what are their activities, what are the projects they have, and so on, and then sometimes you can probably just see it there. However, when we talk about corruption in this country, it seems to have taken an amoeba type of body, where when you think you have it captured this way, it mutates, it actually breaks up and goes and comes out with a totally different image. And even for us as journalists, as we cover corruption, we find ourselves in that same dilemma of, oh, here it is happening in this direction, and here it is happening in that direction. However, now when we start to ask the questions, we look like we are the bad policeman who's not playing ball. Our business is not to play ball, though. Our business is to actually highlight it, find it, and get the accurate data. Which I have said, half the time it is hidden somewhere. And the minute you smell it because of the smoke and you know there's a fire, you get hit at really hard. You get hit at really hard. I mean, you have seen some of the things that have happened with media practitioners who go very aggressively against certain subjects, even like corruption. But that does not even kill us, and it doesn't even say that we don't cover it. We still will cover it. However, we want to cover it for the good of the people. We are, I mean, as I said a little earlier, our business is to hold others accountable, especially government. It is to enable transparency and to demand it. And when that transparency does not happen, then, you know, first we begin with the suspicion and so on and so forth. And then we do write the stories. When you think about corruption and when we write about corruption and it takes the headline for weeks, there's something that it does to the public. And I want to say that that corruption needs to really be captured and put in its place. It kills the dream in the individual's mind. Now I'll go to my voice story. Sometime in 2011, I happened to be driving on Mombasa Road, and I stopped at Voi. In that small town, there was a man with a mkokoteni, and on it was written, "My Vision 2030." And I thought, my goodness, this guy, he has his Vision 2030. So I stopped to talk to him. The journalist I am, we talk to everybody. You never know where you find the story. And so I asked him, "You have written My Vision 2030 on your mkokoteni. What exactly does it mean to you?" And he knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to get out of pushing that mkokoteni. How? He didn't know. He had no plan. He didn't know that this is what I'm going to do, but he knew, I want to get out of here. Okay? So I asked him, now without a plan, how are you going to get out of here? And he said, well, I will see what happens, because I hear there are plans. There are plans by, as they say, wakubwa, the big people, to take us out of poverty, because he felt that he is in a state of poverty. So I said, okay, how will you know about those plans? He said, nitangojea iandikwe kwa gazeti. So if it's not written there, how to get him out of there? Do you know now that's where he's counting on it to come from? The newspaper. And I mean, it has a nice ending, because about 4 years ago, I went to same place. I don't come from there, but it's a place I like. So I went back there and I tried to look for him. And yes, I did trace him. And now, he had nice things to tell me. First, he was not even pushing mkokoteni anymore. And he was telling me how he had moved from the house that he had, which was made of mud. Now he was staying in a brick house. And that's a movement. Because now he has a mabati roof. When it rains, he can hear the drops. That is a movement that we take for granted, but it is a movement. And then he said, you know, one day I hope I will have electricity. I truly want to go back now and see whether the last mile reached him. Because if it did, that will have completely transformed his life from what it used to be to something else. However, there will be a rider on it. He will have to work probably a little harder to keep that light on if and when if it has come. So we look at that. So I would want to even ask him, what does he think about all the corruption that he reads? And I have had conversation with others in Nairobi, and they tell me, you know, it kills my dream. I just keep feeling, the more we lose money, the more I cannot change from where I am, the more I can't move forward. That's how those stories of corruption affect. And that is not to say that we can't cover them because they're breaking the dreams of the citizens. We must cover them so that we try and find ways to stop them. And to stop them, first of all, is to name them. You know, when you go to a doctor and he tells you you are sick, he tells you the name of what you're suffering from. Then he tells you, now this is what we're going to do. So for us, I think we just be very honest and sincere and say, this is the name of the corruption that we have. This is who is responsible for it, and deal with them without mercy. Because the minute we have mercy, I mean, you cannot treat an illness if you're also feeling sorry for it. You're saying, we can't chase you away, disease, because we think this is the place where you live. Come on. We just have to be really bold. And that boldness, it will come at a cost, because we will not look good. But it is for the better of where we are going. I mean, I look at my country, and in fact, with the vice chair who is sitting in the audience, he said, you know, our country is very rich. If we are able to achieve what we have when so much is getting siphoned out, how much more if that wasn't going? So it is for us, and not just those who sit in this room, not even the decision makers, but even the local public, the people themselves. So in this new Naona Mapya, for crying out loud, can we put an aspect of fighting corruption at the grassroots level so that nobody will feel compelled to give a bribe to a policeman of 50 shillings to let them go ahead when they have made a mistake in traffic. If we do not incorporate it, because it has to be everybody's responsibility. It is not the responsibility of only those who are in positions of decision making. It is the responsibility of everyone. And believe me, we will write all those stories. You guys watch the stories of John Allan Namu. He follows corruption the whole way, and he sees it from grassroots all the way to the highest offices. And then we sit back and we say, hiya, and we do nothing about it. We have to get out of that space where we are saying, hiya. In this Naona Mapya, and in fact now I'm going to read up on it because I wasn't even aware of it until today. I'm going to read up on it and see what are the aspects of that Naona Mapya. Is it Naona Mapya and it is affecting other people and leaving me out? Is it Naona Mapya that is including all of us as citizens of this country? So that there is that connection. And I'm thinking that at the time when that gentleman was writing my Vision 2030 on his mkokoteni, we as a country, we had captured his imagination to aspire for something. We need to go back and recapture it, begin to change the mindsets of the people. And with that vision, you know, the vision must have its momentum side, which is driven by those aspirations of those Kenyans at that level. So I think there's pretty much we can do, and we will write about corruption. By the way, we will fish it out. We will look for it any which way, and that takes me back to access to information that Rapuro was talking about. If we as the media don't even have access to that information, surely those ones who are up country, will they really? In a language that they can understand? They won't. We are looking for these documents. And yes, they are written in very flowery language. And when you begin to ask, okay, can you just explain this one? Because I am having a feeling there is some little detail that I am not getting correctly. You know, then it seems like we are being suspicious of it, we are being negative about it. No, we are not. In fact, you watch, if there are media people in here, watch the story they will write after today. Just watch. And please, come out of the thinking that the media is a PR tool. It is not, and it will not be. It is not, it will not be. Yes, we have accompanied you to all these launches and all these, yes, but that's not the story. That's not the story. We go back end and we say, okay, what's not working in this? What we have been shown is all nice, and what is the other side? And that's the story for us. And that's, you see, you need to see the media as finding that other story so that we can improve and make things a little better. So look at it from both sides. We are not looking to bring our country down. We never will. We can't, because we belong to it. It is ours. Thank you.
And earthing the story is the message there. And I know time is not on our side, but I want to, Rapuro, you wanted to add something very quickly, please?
Yes, I have a couple of points to make. One is what the chairman and the PS have talked about on the front of economic management, of which national debt is part of. I think, Chairman, you said you haven't seen a stress yet when it comes to the front of national debt. But the stress is already visible in ways that go directly to the citizens. I think if we were to put a graphic of the types that you showed us during your presentation as to just how many new taxes the government has come to put in place since 2012, you will be shocked. Why? Because part of it is when the international community, our partners, come in and look at our numbers, they find that these numbers really do not match our intentions in terms of borrowing, in terms of balancing our budget, and hence what the PS is talking about, fiscal consolidation. I think it has come to a point where, Chairman, imagine somebody is having a very frank discussion about putting excise tax on water. Historically, you know that excise tax is a tax used to discourage consumption. Why would we want to discourage ourselves from consuming water? So when you look this past budget, the kind of taxes that we have proposed to put in place, some of them have been stopped by the courts, including a sector which you understand very well, where we were trying to introduce what they call the Robin Hood tax. All this is a momentum that looks into the future. How are we going to do this? At the very other level, you talked very positively about the effort we have made to decentralize government with our constitutional mandate of introducing county governments. And the Constitution itself states how we share the national revenue with the county governments. I can tell you, and the PS is here to confirm, that the National Treasury was unable to remit quite a large amount of money to the counties, and they have themselves come out to say there was a challenge with the revenue collection. And so when you see the financial year is ending, about 80 billion that was due to be transferred to the county government cannot be transferred because they have a challenge with the revenue collection. There's a strain already happening. This year, for example, if you look at the data that is available from official sources, we plan to pay to spend about just about 500 billion shillings in debt servicing. This, as we go along, will deepen as we get into next year when we start paying some of the loans we have taken out to do beautiful infrastructure like the standard gauge railway. But that is just one small aspect. My big point that I wanted to make, Chairman and the peers, is that you really diagnosed it correctly. I think it was the World Bank that said Kenya is a plane that is running on a single engine. A plane usually runs on at least 2 engines on both sides. And this, they were referring to the fact that while on the domestic front, a lot of good things are happening, our economy remains driven by domestic consumption, which is very large and growing robustly. What has been lacking is export, how to develop our export sector, and hence the manufacturing that Chairman talked about. Our manufacturing, as he said, has remained constant and stagnant at about 11%, between 9 and 11%. If you look at the history of development and the progress, the countries that have progressed into this industrializing or industrialized status that we are seeking to attain have done so on the back of very robust manufacturing that then produces goods that are exported to earn whatever we need to build, continue building internal capacity. And 2, agriculture. Chairman, PS, it is my considered view that we are not going to make much progress in attaining the Vision 2030 if we continue to pay scanty attention to agriculture. The Chairman, Churchill, made it a point when he spoke about the state of our agricultural sector, how coffee is doing, how tea is doing, how maize is doing, how sugar is doing. The reason agriculture is so critical is this. Agriculture is actually what provides a source of living for more than 70% of our people. And if we want to take or improve the livelihoods of these people, we would rather pay attention to that sector of the economy that delivers the best results to the greatest number of people, which is agriculture. When we are talking about the collapse of the coffee industry, we are talking about the collapse of income of millions of families. When we talk about the collapse of sugar industry, we are talking about the collapse of a source of income for millions of families, of people in this country, and so on. And therefore, improved agriculture comes with improved incomes to households. Households that have a better income can better finance their health, can better educate their children beyond what the state is providing. And so is manufacturing. Manufacturing produces jobs, at least quality jobs, that can improve incomes of households and carry the momentum forward. Lastly, I want to talk about corruption in a very short while. The reason we should pay attention to corruption is the point that, Chairman, you made. It's about governance. And corruption is at the center of governance, critically so, in the fact that it actually derails the very well-planned and mechanism for distribution of resources. When you talk about corruption, it means we are unable to spend money that we allocated for a certain purpose, for that particular purpose, whether it is health or infrastructure development. And that pulls us back. So unless we tackle this monster and see it as a thing that really hits all of us where we are, we will be unable to attain the social justice that we are looking for. One, because a few of us are able to run ahead with what does not belong to them. And two, we are incapable or unable then to do or execute the plans that we have put in this beautiful document.
Thank you very much, Raporo. And you're lucky you're in the panel because you've actually rolled out our next part, which was a question and answer session. And you've asked a few questions. And I'm sure Dr. Muya probably would want to react to them. And to just put it into perspective, Dr. Muya, a few issues were raised by Raporo before I come back to the audience, and he touched on the issue of debt again, the issue of agriculture and taxes.
Thank you. I really do appreciate the opportunity to make a comment, but I'll start with what my sister here did talk about corruption. And I want to refer you to the booklets that are with you on page 8. Please, with humility, I ask you to look at page 8. And on page 8, you see something that looks like the African heart. And that is Vision 2030 in terms of the social pillar, political pillar, economic pillar. And the bottom, you have the enablers and macro foundations, which a lot of times when people talk about Vision 2030, I see them forgetting, which is unfortunate, because this is the foundation on which Vision 2030 is built. But below it, and that is why I'm making this intervention, is something called National Values System. Because after we wrote Vision 2030 and launched in 2008, we found that there is a social aspect which is missing, and that is the national values. And it is after that that we engaged, and in 2012, a cabinet paper was produced, and a policy was produced on national values and principles of governance. I want to ask the members of the media here, how many of you are familiar with that policy on national values and principles of governance? Because that's where the truth starts. And that is the building block of looking at a society that has good morals and has good values and is ethical, because that drives corruption and behavior. And so I want to challenge the members of the media who are here, that as we are writing about corruption, we go back to where corruption comes from. And this to me is very important, because 2 studies that were done recently by Kipra showed that the people who are most believable are the media in the country. In fact, more believable than the clergy. So if the media had the most believable people, then you have a role, and a very important and critical role, to make sure that society thinks correctly, society acts correctly, society has the correct information. So I want to throw the challenge to the members of the media, because you are very important in terms of driving the agenda of the country forward. Now, having said that, I want to respond quickly to the comments made by Raburu here. And the first one is a question about driving manufacturing, driving agriculture. And obviously, I've mentioned about the frameworks that are there, because government does not do agriculture. And government does not do manufacturing. Because the business of government is not business. Because the business of business is business. So I want to challenge members of the private sector, and people of the media here, you are in the private sector. So grab the opportunities that the government has come up with in agriculture, in manufacturing, and let us prosper. Now, one of the challenges that we have seen as we have been looking at this from planning perspective is that the labor productivity index for Kenya is very poor. If you compare with Nigeria, Nigeria is even ahead of us. Algeria ahead of us. In fact, many countries in Africa are ahead of us in terms of the labor productivity. And I want to encourage members of the media to get in touch with a national institution called the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center, which is in the Ministry of Labor. Let me repeat. It is called the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center. It is under the Ministry of Labor. There is where you'll find the challenge in terms of how our labor is not productive enough. It doesn't have that high productivity, and that is why a lot of times we are not able to compete at the international level. So I want to ask what the media can do to help us to improve on that labor productivity. The question about exports. Kenya is leading in terms of opening up our space for growing exports. Recently, we were the first country to sign on this Continental African Treaty on free trade. Kenya was number 1, followed by Ghana. That is now to create the space for exports. At the same time, Kenya has also been championing open skies for our airlines to be going everywhere in Africa, and that is to create the framework for our export growth. As we are talking this week, we have got the Trade Exhibition Week, which is going on at KICC, a big thing, part of the framework of growing our exports. The last item that I want to talk about is the question about taxes. And I want to say fairly quickly, and this I will just say, and related to some comment that I've had recently, that sometimes when people are talking about what government does, there is the thinking that government doesn't think through the things that we do, which is very unfortunate. In fact, I've been in a few sessions where we are talking with professionals, and this was APSEA, this is the Association of Private Sector, Association of Professional, I think, Societies of East Africa. And they were lamenting and saying, professionals are excluded from government. And I asked them, my brothers, what do you think I am? Because I am a professional in my own self. I belong to professions of ICPAC. I'm a qualified accountant. I'm a qualified public secretary. I'm a qualified banker, and many other things. So we are professionals in government, and we think seriously about the things that we put on the table. It's not that things are done at the drop of a hat, and you see things happening. If I can talk about taxes, countries that have very high taxes also give a lot of services. I've asked one of my colleagues to give me an indication, because I know countries like Denmark. What is the tax rate in Denmark? 60%. 60%. Norway, about, somebody has written this for me. Norway is 39%. Sweden, 56%. So when we complain about our tax rates, let us ask ourselves, what does the money do after we are taxed? If a lot of the money gets lost in corruption, that is very wrong. But if that money which we are taxed is used to give us services, let us not just complain about taxes for the sake of complaining. Because we look at the best principles in taxation about the ability to pay, the burden of tax, whether it is progressive, before we pronounce and propose any taxes. Thank you.
Somebody just allow me to just add to Christine and Lapuru that I think there's an opportunity, a window of opportunity for media to help this country liberate itself from the grip of corruption. You enjoy the highest level of trust. There seems to be political goodwill to deal with the corruption at the moment. Kenyans are sensitized adequately because corruption is diversion of public goods or funds to private use. It's actually theft, and we need to expose it as such. And essentially, what eventually it does, it becomes a cost of doing business. The amount that is spent on corruption is an additional cost to doing. We become inefficient as a country. We become less competitive. So there is nobody in support of corruption other than the corrupt ones. So as a society, we need to redeem ourselves. And I don't think there is anybody who is better positioned in our society than the media to shine the light and rally the nation to redeem itself. The cost of corruption should be made too high, such that there are no incentives of people being corrupt. So we are fully in support. Do much more than you are doing, Christine.
Do more than what you're doing, Christine. But I guess that also leads to sometimes intimidation, Dr. Mwangi, because just this week we had the Speaker of the National Assembly asking some journalists to go and face a House committee because of covering corruption in Parliament. So that's part of what we face as journalists when we deal with those issues. I think now I want to open it up to the room for the people that might have some questions for the panel that we have here. I can already see a hand over there, so if we can get a microphone. Wow, I think I like the reaction, but the first hand was at that corner there. The gentleman wearing an orange blazer. Then we'll take one from my vice chair here, and then we'll take one from there. And I saw a hand here, and I saw a hand here as well. So we'll start from the one at the back.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Clive Ayuko from the Whistling African. It's an online news publication. Now, my question is to the DG and perhaps also Dr. Mwangi. You spoke about mobile phones rising from 1 million to 42 million. I think this is a considerable number. But then again, my question is on knowledge sharing. We talk about knowledge sharing and the importance of actually encouraging it, but we actually not using it in perhaps areas or institutions where they actually inquired. For instance, in schools, in secondary schools, in primary schools, and the government has a bad habit of banning things. It banned the ballpoint pen, it banned the calculator, and now it's banning the smartphone. How is this actually setting us back in terms of Vision 2030? Thank you.
So basically that's a question of technology and how it can be applied in schools. You already have the microphone.
Good morning. Thank you very much for organizing this forum. First and foremost, just to say that perhaps it could be organized on a quarterly basis so that as media we have regular briefs. Then I go on to my questions.
Start with your name, please.
Okay. My name is Masli Nyambala. I work for the Association of Media Women in Kenya. I wanted to find out how well the kind of programs you have to address the issue about national values. Because you might be doing something, but the whole issue about corruption is impacting the the fact that we are missing a lot of talent when we exclude women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marceline. Maina, you also had a question?
Good morning. My name is Samuel Maina. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Editors Guild. I want to start from where the DG talked about page 8. Page 8. I tend to think the national values should be moved up. It should not be the last item in this pyramid, because I strongly believe if it comes up, then it will determine so many things. We can't achieve all these without the national values and principles. I want to advise the board that I can see you are 39 members of the board, and I want you to take a cue from what we have done today. All these members are the people the media cover every day. Even today, many of these people, maybe they are not here because they are attending some assignments where journalists are. Can they talk about Vision 2030? In their speech, whichever speech they are presenting somewhere, can they pick some of this great information, Dr. James, you have presented? Can they talk about this information in their speech? And it will find itself in the media. Finally, we have about 273 radio stations in Kenya. Few of them are broadcasting from foreign land, but many of them are vernacular radio stations. Can we have the board thinking about taking this information to my mother in Gatanga, who listens to Kameme, Bukena, Inoro, Osho, demystify this information for her to participate in the implementation of this Vision 2030. On the issue of corruption, we are also, don't look at media as if we are on the other side. Media people are also Kenyans. We would also, when this country is performing well, when corruption is eliminated or reduced, then we also benefit, because we also have families here, we also investors here. But we will not close any door in reporting corruption. And we will open and dig and dig and dig deep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a hand there, and also, if we can get a microphone to this gentleman here, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Joyce Ogundo, Secretary Trade. And allow me, first of all, to, I'm being told to stand up. I thought I was loud enough sitting down. Sorry. Allow me to add my voice in appreciating the media in their divine responsibility in disseminating factual information most of the time, and mark the word most of the time. So I want just to follow up on the chairman's presentation on an emphasis on competitiveness of the nation. And I want to do this in connection with the wholesale and retail trade sector in this country, and being one of the areas, the key areas which was identified by Kenya Vision 2030 to be a flagship project in contributing to the 10% economic growth annually. And as we know that trade development and regulation is devolved, it's a county government's function. Why am I talking about this? Is because of competitiveness. We cannot be competitive enough if we continuously increase the cost of doing business in Kenya. And this is what is happening in the counties. And why am I raising it here? I'm raising it here that could the Vision 2030 Delivery Board find a way of engaging the media to give a platform to dialogue with the county governments? Because when you look at what they are doing, and mind you, it is in the wholesale and retail trade sector that the indigenous Kenyans are involved in. Because as we even talk about Kenya Vision 2030, we should be impacting on the lives of the indigenous Kenyans so that they can do the savings which the chairman is talking about, so that we translate that in the investment in this country to create wealth and reduce poverty levels. So I would like to urge creating a platform to debate with the county governments and involve the national government so that as they enact bylaws, they do the bylaws in compliance with the national policies so that together we reduce the cost of doing business so that we enhance the competitiveness of Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Kulundu.
I'm Hassan Kulundu. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the Kenya Guild. My challenge goes to Dr. Mwangi's presentation. Now, Dr. Mwangi, Dr. Muya, I think you are a very brilliant economist, and I'm sure you must have come across this publication. There's a book, a publication, I think was authored by a journalist. It's called How to Lie with Statistics. Now,
Sorry, I didn't hear.
there's a publication, I'm sure, being economists, you must have read that book. It's titled How to Lie with Statistics. After the publication of that book, that's when the world moved away from the Bretton Woods institution indices of measuring the health of an economy, and we went to what we call the Human Development Index by the UNDP. Now, when I listened to Dr. Mwangi's presentation here, it is what that author said, how to lie with statistics, because you are still basing yourselves on the econometrics benchmarks of bring what? Assessing the health of an economy. And all of us know where those statistics lead us to. They're not true. And the reason why you say so, it goes to what the story of Christine Nguku and the voice story. You said you met somebody the first time he was pushing a mkokoteni. Next time you met him, he was living in a brick house, correct? I think what Christine did not ask, why did he stop pushing the mkokoteni? Maybe because of old age or disease he did have. Then you did ask that, why? Then you did ask how he got himself into a brick house. Perhaps he poached elephants in the Tsavo, sold ivory, and did what? Built a house. So, and that's why we cannot keep on using the econometrics, the critical standards of that. Dr. Mwangi, should anybody be worried that you are lying in statistics?
That's quite a tough question there from Kulundu. And I think we will take one at a time. I know you might want to respond to the last one because it sounds like it's the juiciest. But let's go systematically. Christine and Rapuro, you guys are lucky. There are no questions that have been thrown to you. But Christine, maybe you can elaborate on what Kulundu has asked in terms of how did the gentleman stop pushing a mkokoteni and get himself into a brick house? Did you ask that question?
Oh, I actually asked. He hadn't stopped pushing the mkokoteni, and no, he's not ill, and neither is he old. What happened is that there was more demand for his services because people were now able to move things from place A to place B. So he was making just a little more money, okay? So he didn't poach any elephants. So yes, and you see, he had this vision of somewhere he was going, you know? It's about just building that aspiration in the minds of an individual. Thank you.
Dr. Muya, I think there were two very similar questions that were asked on that end, and both of them touched on the social pillar, in particular the education one, and one was asking about technology at the lower levels of education and how that is changing and some of the things that are being banned. And of course, Marceline also asked something very similar also, just trying to find out what is being done within the education sector by the delivery board.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. One of the things that I would like to say is that within the Vision Delivery Board, we have membership of the PSS in education. They are members of the board, just to make sure that we interact with that sector properly. But having said that, the biggest area that we are pushing in the Vision Delivery Board is the area about TVETs, this technical vocational training. because that is where we are seeing a big gap in terms of what we have done in our education system all the years. And I want to reiterate the question about technology at that level of both primary basic education that is involved by the free tablets that we talked about earlier on, is an area which is a key focus for the Vision 2030 Delivery Board. And that is also informed by, if you look at the government planning, the medium-term plan 3, it has also taken that into consideration to make sure that we've got proper harnessing of knowledge networks, and especially at the very early stages, because people form their values, their ethics, their thinking framework at very early stage. In fact, when we engage with the Ministry of Health, and I'm happy that the representative for Ministry of Health is here with us, just raise and wave. That is one of the directors who is an alternate of the PS for Health. When we engaged with them, they told us that people form their mindsets up to the 7 years of age. So if you don't sort out children up to 7 years of age, you lose them. So even the things that we are talking about corruption here, I would like us to shift gear and go back and ask ourselves, when do people form their mindsets? We could even go back and look at the health, because I've been told also in other spheres that some of the things that we are addressing, corruption and unethical behavior, it is because of ill mental health, which we are not measuring, but I will not get into that. Let me comment quickly about the national values. There was a question that was asked by two people, and Maina, I want to respond to that. And I want to say, if you look at that African heart, where national values on page 8 are put at the bottom, that is to mean they are the most important. It is the foundation, it's the anchor. So if you put them at the top, we'll miss it. So we are saying that is where we should start. We should start with people at very early stage. In fact, I will even move even further and say we've also been told, as we are doing the national values, that children form their mindsets even in their mother's womb when they are at embryo stage. And so there's a lot of engagement that we can do on that, because national values is important. But what have we done on the national values, to answer the question of Madame there? I talked about the policy that was formulated in 2012. It is a cabinet paper, among the cabinet papers that we have. We have a directorate for national cohesion and values under Office of the President, led by Michael Ndungu. We've got it now as a sector within Vision 2030, because national values and ethics was not a sector in Vision 2030 originally. And then national values and ethics are cross-cutting in the medium-term plan 3. And in addition to that, all the performance contracts in the public sector have got a component of national values. And the performance contract for the Vision Delivery Board, it is Sophie Odupoy here who runs with it. Sophie, just wait. Yeah, that is the lady, the Director for Communication and Strategy, who runs with national values and the related things of performance contracting for the Vision Delivery Board. The last comment that I want to respond to is the one shared by Hassan Kululu. And Hassan, you talked about how people lie with statistics. You can also put that on the positive, how people tell the truth with statistics. It depends on which side of the cup you want to look at. But let me address the question that you've raised and ask ourselves, why are we using per capita income and not the UNDP number of Human Development Index? It is because the sizing and the profile of our economy, when we were doing Vision 2030 and even up to now, we wanted to benchmark using the World Bank standard. And the World Bank standard uses per capita income, where you categorize a country as lower, a middle, or upper. So that is a statistic that we say we want to follow that parameter. At that point, the Human Development Index by UNDP was just being formulated, and I agree with you entirely. It is more superior than the per capita income because it measures per capita income, it measures literacy rate, and life expectancy. But then we are still working on our numbers. But I want also to add, there's even a more superior one that you have not talked about. which is called the Happiness Index. And that is the latest. That's the latest kid on the block. The country with the highest happiness index is Bhutan, a little country up in the Tibet plateaus, Himalayas somewhere. And that is some conversation that we already have in Ministry of the National Treasury and Planning about how then to incorporate the UNDP, Human Development Index, and our Happiness Index going forward. But the metric that we have, which we want to perfect, is the per capita income, because that is what World Bank uses. But we are not blind to the fact that there are better measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hassan, I'm not going to ask the chairman to respond, not unless he wants, I'm hoping that question has been responded to. Because Bona Chair, yeah, he will. Because there are other issues that have been, other questions that have come in that have not been responded to.
Yes, for agriculture. What's this?
Okay, no problem. So that's on the bit on agriculture, because I know there was a question that was asked, and I know that as part of Vision 2030, it was improvement of agriculture, especially arid and semi-arid land, and probably you can.
Thank you. I think
that.
I just wanted to comment on what Raburu has talked about. If we become a country that's going to develop, we have to look at the exports. And if you look at the big four, actually we put manufacturing as number one. And the enabler for manufacturing, agriculture is going to play a key role. Because you're going to look at agro-processing, you're going to look at the raw materials so that you're able to manufacture and export. And my colleague Piers Moya said that the role of the government is to become actually like an enabler in terms of the environment, making sure that all policies are geared towards increasing our competitiveness in exports. And therefore, all policies now have been put in place. Number one, infrastructure. Initially, there was a lot of there's currently a lot of investment in infrastructure. As a result, we are going to be competitive in terms of our produce, because we're able now to, the products are able to reach the market. The government is looking at issues like BT cotton, which is going to be a game changer in the textile industry. Kenya right now, I think we are looking at our policies to a high level in terms of the research has been done. What we now need to do is change or amend our laws so that we allow the GMO in cotton. This is going to be, because we are talking about the textile. We are having the EPZ textile manufacturers in the country, the AGOA policy that has been launched. So if we go now in terms of the BT cotton and change and make sure that we produce these raw materials here in the country, then you are going to manufacture and export. So therefore, we are going to be more competitive. We import a lot from India and China in terms of textile. So if we change that, there's going to be a lot of benefit to the country. We've also put infrastructure in terms of like, when it comes to, we talked about arid and semi-arid in livestock. That is the area that under which we are now putting a lot of, making sure that the capacity building in the resilience to climate change, the pastoralist community. We've looked at the quarantine facility that we want to develop in Bachuma as one of the Vision 2030 flagship project. So that now has been put, and we want to develop it, complete it, so that we are able to export, one, live animals, for those who, the countries which demand the live animals. Two, we are also going to ensure that we have the industrial park, that we are able to manufacture leather, because we shall be slaughtering some of these animals, export the meat, but the skins and hides will now form or be used by the leather manufacturing. So I think the government is now in the right place. We are calling on the private sector to come on board. All this is what we are saying as media. You are the ones now to help us take out so that the investors will be able to pick up the government policies that are in place so that they come and invest. So you kind of, your role as a media is to facilitate between the government and the private investors. So I think the government has put a lot of plans in place. We now need the media to sensitize the public, the investors to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bona PS. So I come back to you, Dr. Mwangi. Now, several questions that have not been responded to. First, you still have to respond to Hassan Kulundu. Are you lying using data and statistics? And two, there was a question that was asked about Kenya engaging in trade agreements that are not beneficial to the common mwananchi, and also the two-third gender rule and how that is being catered for within Vision 2030.
Thank you very much. Let's start with the first question on use of technology in schools, particularly the calculators and smartphones. And that really speaks to the tension on the balance that is required to be built by our education system about creative thinking. When you talk about creative thinking, you see it really takes a completely directly opposite position. When you then give the kids the calculator to solve other than creatively. The second one, other than creative thinking, is problem solvings. If you look at smartphones, how quickly they solve the problems, the engagement of the mind and the brain. So it is more of the development of the mind, that tension that is there. But we are very excited that the mobile phones, as you have indicated, has really become a major source of software development in this country. If you look at Kenya, it's now ranked among the global leaders in mobile technology, and simply because the devices have been appropriately used immediately after school. Nyambudura had a very good issue about education and core values. There is coherent collaboration, and we hope the nation of values will be embedded at the very low level in our education system, and hopefully we will see that. I think on the gender rule, I think that's a critical issue, a great attempt by our constitution to enforce it, whether you call it affirmative or not. But the most striking achievement is that if you look at primary schools, of the total population, I think girls are now slightly, 50.8, they're slightly more than boys in primary schools, suggesting that we, at the grassroots level, at the base level, we've almost been able to achieve. So if we continue to give them equal opportunities, if we become a nation of equal opportunities, then that is just a question of time to bring the true human resource. I think trade agreements, you are right, we still need to reconsider. But remember, the global trade imbalance is simply because of what those, if you look at developed countries, the tariffs they put against agriculture, trade arrangements, they are not even. And it's the question of negotiation power that comes into play. But truly the government needs to continue doing more. I think our Vice Chairman, you got it was very well answered. It's at the bottom because we want to be the foundation of everything. It's the roots that holds the national value system to hold the whole of the vision. And then, of course, we come to the bigger question of statistics. And before Hassan's, Joyce Lile talked well about competitiveness. Hassan, you are right. You can use statistics to give the impression you have. But when we give statistics of full employment, enrollment at the primary level, that is human development. When we talked about health, that is human development. We have really, the vision has two aspects to it. Competitiveness, which is environment you are creating for people so that they can unleash their full potential. You can have most gifted people, but then if the environment is not competitive enough, then they will be undermined by what they have not been given. The second aspect is quality of life. The vision is measuring quality of life. And that is why the issue of governance is very central, because even the mind, the psyche of the mind is more important in quality of life. How do you feel? Are you feeling abused and misused by your leadership? That is where it starts. The second one is talking about you, your health, your education, the education of your children, the water, drainage, sewer, housing, Those are personal issues to the individual. And that is where I said we have performed much better. But we still need to get the microeconomic right. And the statistics there is purely for competitiveness. Thank you very much, Hassan.
Dr. maybe there's another question that was asked, and it was the issue of devolution and how you're bringing on board the devolved governments in implementing of Vision 2030.
Thank you very much. Devolution has become a very core aspect of our governance structure, not just in the sense that this is the structure that is nearest to the people, that's the structure that interacts with the people, but that it is intended to have 45% of the resources. And so it is important those resources be appropriately as intended, answer the direct needs, the specific needs of the local community. However, it appears that the structures have not been fully harmonized, such that there is no coherence between national policy and county policies. And like was said, in terms of competition, you're trying to bring competitiveness in the country. You're trying to reduce the cost of doing business by developing infrastructure, and then suddenly you see tariffs being levied at the retail level. The cost at retail level, like we saw in Nairobi, moving from 3,000, I think, to 15,000. And the question is, isn't that counterintuitive to the objective? And so there is huge room for harmonization. We're engaging the Council of Governors consistently so that we bring these issues out. We're helping them to study competitiveness of each county so that they are not just competing doing the same things. They differentiate themselves given their competitive advantage. And hopefully, with the time, we'll bring them on board and harmonize all these. But remember, it's the early days. And so there's a lot of confusion. And also there was issue of capacity. Counties like remote counties that had no infrastructure could not even attract the appropriate human capital initially. But we are seeing with more resources being put, we are seeing they are now becoming much better. So in the next 3 elections, I think the vision is heading 30-32, thereabout. I hope we'll have got it right. Yeah, but it's structures, evolution of structures. Sometimes they take time. But it's a genuine concern.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Mwangi. I think I'd really like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Kevit Desai, who's substituted Dr. Buya. And Dr. Desai, maybe there's a question, or actually during the presentation, there was something that was brought out, which was the issue of technical institutions versus university enrollment. And the question was, why the disparity? And probably maybe you can help us understand, and also probably tell us what it is that you're doing to ensure that we have more enrollments in the technical institutions.
Thank you. Vision 2030 is deliberately promoting the area of social, economic, and environmental development, and in doing so, it's questioning the key functions of how we promote this, as far as the chairman said, creating a competitive environment, promoting human capital development, promoting entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, TVET is the greatest enabler to all 3 of those functions, because TVET cuts across the entire spectrum of competencies. Its outcomes are based on promoting self-employment and gainful employment. But most importantly, its key outputs include skills, competencies, research, the promotion of entrepreneurship. And for a long time, as a nation, we've been focusing primarily on universities, and this is our current predicament, where we only have, while we need to create a national system to cater for 10% of our population, most developed countries like India and China and so on have 10% of their population enrolled in TVET. And so the debate that needs to take place and the story that needs to promote further enrollment is one of the most important priorities. the transition of high levels of productivity, innovation, and efficiency are directly related to TVET, technical vocational education training sectors. And these institutions are spread throughout this country. We have some 800 plus vocational training institutions. By the end of next year, 290 technical vocational centers. We have 11 polytechnics, 11 science technology institutes. A lot more has to be done in terms of promoting greater collaboration in establishing aspects of quality and relevance, because we need to scale this system to promote the highest level of transitions of young people into a structured system which recognizes their competencies, whether it's a carpenter, a technician, or a nurse. And it's through this environment that we hope to have a deliberate effort towards promoting links between the productive sector and the TVET sector in order to address aspects of quality and relevance. There's also the aspects of governance, but increasingly we're looking at innovative ways where we're promoting centers of excellence around the Big Four theme, thereby looking at the entire value chain from seed to shop, but all the competencies, skills, research that's required in order to make the entire sector viable. Within TVET structures, they are relevant to all the Big Four, and more specifically in terms of seeing how we're able to co-create the necessary capacities for our economic transformation, which would then promote the realization of Vision 2030. So a lot more debate is required here in terms of the relevance and quality of skills, and to address the specialization and the promotion of TVET nationally, and the importance of how TVET can be a great enabler for a young person and their transition. They may be gifted in academics, and therefore, the university is the right path. But then you can have a child who's gifted with their hands, with their imagination. They have a passion for some sort of trade or skill. And those are gifted young children for TVET institutions, and there lies the distinction. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank my panel very much. So let's give a round of applause, please, for a job well done. And I think I'm going to ask you to, no more questions for you. So we've run out of time, really. We actually 1 hour over the time that we were supposed to have finished these. For members of the media that are here who might want to do interviews, we will allow you to do a Q&A after we get the vote of thanks. I've also been requested to ask that we get a photo of the board members as well as members of the Kenya Editors Guild. From me, I think it's a big thank you for the opportunity, and I say asante for allowing me to be part of this session. I'd like to invite now Zachary Aoko, who's Assistant Director, Technical Education, to come and give the vote of thanks. Asante ni sana.
Thank you very much, Bwana Muraya, Chairman, Kenya Delivery Board, my peers, Dr. Desai, and members of the media. I take this opportunity to thank the Vision 2030 for this good forum, and particularly for us from the TVET subsector of education, to say that this is a very good opportunity for us to clearly speak of the position of TVET, particularly as my peers has put it, when it comes to our position in the delivery of Vision 2030 as an enabler. I remember as a ministry and as State Department of Vocational and Technical Training, we also have our own vision for TVET. And I believe that as we do all this, we work alongside the other players to ensure that we achieve Vision 2030 sooner than later. And on TVET, we talk of to develop skilled human resource for global competitiveness and employment. I remember when Chair gave his presentation here, he talked of the key word, competitiveness. And here also as TVET, we are looking forward to producing skilled human resource that can compete not only locally, but even internationally. I believe that we are just, we still remember very well, we are just through with the World Cup the other day, and when it comes to issues, competition, we know of teams that were in the World Cup, that it was purely on competition. Even with the discrimination we have world over, we still have others from even other parts of the world that could have been discriminated upon. But because of the quality in them, they found themselves in the best teams in the world, if not up to the one that took World Cup competition. And that's why in TVET, we also believe that we are focused on ensuring that the skilled personnel that we produce will be the one that will lead us to the skills that we require for us to achieve Vision 2030 as is in our plan. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look into all this, I believe for the last 6 years, with the reforms that we have in place from the year 2013 to date, a lot has taken place in the subsector of TVET. In the reforms that we talk about, as my peers has indicated here, in the area of access, today we have technical and vocational colleges across the country. And if you get me later, I'll tell you where the one in your constituency is or where it is in the neighboring constituency, if we have not yet reached your constituency. To date, out of the 290 constituencies, we only have 87 constituencies without. In the last 5 years, the government has done 130. Some of them are ready now, operational, with the state-of-the-art equipment, with the relevant equipment, the technology of the day. So it means we are geared towards achieving what we are supposed to achieve as TVET, towards our role as an enabler. In the area of relevance, we are now not just talking of curriculum, but we are giving the curriculum that is in line with the big four. What is it that industry is asking for in the manufacturing sector and all the other sectors? What is it that they are asking for? Today in TVET, as opposed maybe to the other curricula or other subsectors, we are not talking of the curriculum from a shelf somewhere. We sit with the consumer of the skills that we are providing, and we sit and negotiate and engage and ask, what is it that we should provide as we do the training, so that when the graduate comes out, you will not again talk of retraining the graduate. We'll give you the graduate as per the menu that we wrote together in the curriculum that we are developing today. Under the reforms that we are undergoing, we have the institutions that have been put in place. One of them is squarely dealing on issues curriculum. And this is curriculum for purposes of relevance, in that it will lead us to giving you exactly that skilled personnel that you are looking for. On quality, as I've mentioned, a lot is going on in Kenya today. And in fact, you may not be aware, we are equipping and we are in the process of doing 134 workshops across the country. That is not a mean achievement. If you go to TVET institution today, I don't know maybe whichever college you went to, but I challenge you, visit any college today of TVET. The equipment you'll see there, obviously it may not be comparable if you are in the same skills area. It may not be comparable to what you had, because what we have and what industry is asking about, we are at par when it comes to issues quality. And quality is not only limited to the equipment. We are also talking of quality of the staff. And therefore we are saying we are also upskilling the staff. And as we do all this, as my peers has also indicated, issues governance, we are also focused on that. So therefore I believe as we continue engaging, I'm calling on media once again, let's continue talking, let's continue engaging on this, continue telling the world out there, tell Kenyans what TVET is doing, where they can get the skills, because I believe together, and as the chair of the media fraternity said, where is media in this? Media, let's work together on this. You'll work with us together in TVET, both as enablers, and I believe we'll achieve and we'll give the right information to Kenyans. Thank you once again.
I know I had already said goodbye, but then for the photo, please, if we can have members of the board and members of the Kenya Editors Guild here so that we can have that photo up. And for the one-on-one interviews, for those who might want, just let us know and we'll organize for the interviews. Asanteni.